Hi everybody, I am Lisa Lepke from ProWritingAid and welcome to another session in the ProWritingAid series for writers. And believe it or not, this is our 74th session since we started last March. Initially, we just wanted to keep people busy for those few short weeks that we thought lockdown was going to be. Who knew that we would still be here a year later, but actually we've learned that we completely love doing these sessions and we're never stopping as long as you all keep showing up. So my guest today is Andrea Jones. Andrea, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Hi. Thanks for being here. So, Andrea is the host of the Savvy Social podcast, and she's also the creator of the Savvy Social School. And today's session came about last year in our Facebook group. I just put out some questions to everybody in there just to see what they wanted to learn more about as they were building their author careers and trying to build their profiles. And social media was one of those things that came up a lot. People felt like they put a lot of time into it, but not that much was coming out of it. And they just wanted to know how to do it better. So I reached out to Andrea to come and give us a lesson.
Yes, and I'm excited to start today. As Lisa said, this is interactive, so definitely I want to hear from you in the chat, and questions are encouraged. That's my favorite part, so I'm really looking forward to all of that.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started.
Yeah, I'm going to disappear and I'll see you back at the end for the Q&A.
Fantastic. All right. So as I go through and begin, I'd love to know what kind of writer you are, how you identify yourself, so I can make sure to give specific examples for you throughout today's session. But here is the thing with social media. Some of us are in a social media situationship. Okay. We don't know if we love it. We don't know if we hate it. We don't know what our relationship is with social media. We know it's a huge potential for building out our fiction novel writing careers. But we also know that it can be a huge drain on our system. We can get lost in the scroll. And so today I want to help you understand your relationship with social media, and also help you tackle this big beast so that you can actually use it to grow your authorship. And I see a lot of people putting theirs in the chat: nonfiction writers, sci-fi writers, creative writers. And actually, little fun fact, my husband is an author as well. He wrote a series called the Afton Morrison series, all about this librarian who wants to kill people. So fiction, of course, but I'm familiar with the challenges specifically for writers as well. And there are some common roadblocks when it comes to social media marketing. We feel overwhelmed with the options. If you Google social media strategies or anything like that, there are a ton of options out there. We feel this sense of dread because of all of the social media notifications. I know for me, every time I get a notification, it's like, shoop, my attention goes there and I get distracted. Sometimes we don't feel inspired to post, especially as creative people. We put a ton of time and energy into crafting our work. By the time it gets to social media, we don't have anything left. We're not sure what to post specifically when it comes to promoting our work. And sometimes we feel like a content machine in the sense that we're constantly having to put out new stuff all of the time. So what we're going to talk about today is how to fix that problem, but there really aren't any quick fixes to this. You kind of have to put in the work. It's just like when you're going to write your fantasy novels or your children's books or your memoirs. You have to put in the time and effort in order to get that product at the end. You have to commit to consistency, and I'll talk today about what that is. And then you have to be dedicated to marketing this as a business and not as a hobby. Before we dive into the specifics of this, I do want to talk a little bit about managing all of the things. This is a question I get a lot because there's so many things you could do on social media, and there's so many things you feel like you should do when it comes to social media. So I recommend focusing on one platform for at least 90 days, possibly longer. And when you're picking this platform, we can talk specifically in Q&A if you have questions about which one will work specifically for you. But when you're picking this, try to pick something you know you can commit to for 90 days. Even if I told you, I don't know, the hottest thing in the world is LinkedIn and you have to be on LinkedIn. If you log into LinkedIn and you go, I don't like any of this, it doesn't matter how much I say you should use it, you may not use it. But the thing for this strategy to work is that you're going to focus in on consistency. So the key to success is consistency. And by consistency, I mean going at the same frequency. So it's not necessarily the quantity of posts or the quantity of time. It's really just the same consistent amount of time. And to kind of frame this, I like to think about this as working out. So if you were to decide to go to the gym and get muscles on muscles on muscles, you could decide that you're going to go in on a Saturday and work for 12 hours and then you'll have muscles. And as much as we'd like to believe that, that's not the case. A lot of us need that consistency to it. So consistency like working out. Okay, cool. All right. The first part of this framework is your messaging. And when you're marketing your books, when you're marketing your novels, your memoirs, when you're marketing the things that you do, you want to make sure that you have a clear message. A clear message. And so when we talk about our social media marketing messages, I want you to put this in terms of a framework. So we use what we call the messaging matrix for this that has 3 parts. The first part is your difference. So a lot of you put this in the chat already. Children's book author, YA fiction author. This is really what helps you stand out from the other authors that are out there. You also want to think about your values. For instance, I saw someone wrote in here, LGBTQ romance novels. That's a very specific approach to how you write that will call in your people. And I know for me, that's something that I would look for specifically in romance as well. I love reading diversity-filled romance, not just diverse in skin color, but diverse in types of romantic relationships as well. So adding that into your marketing messages will help call in the right people. And you also want to think about your delivery system. So since a lot of you are writers, I'm going to guess, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, I'm going to guess you prefer writing on social media versus video. If you like video in the chat, let me know. If you prefer writing captions and things like that, also let me know in the chat. But you got to figure out your delivery system. Because if I tell you that you have to go live on video every single day, it doesn't matter if that is the best strategy or not. If you shy away from that type of content, even if your words are as strong as they are, if video is not your thing, it's not going to come out as impactful. I see a lot of people putting writing in the chat. Perfect. Someone said they love video as well, which is great. So you've got to figure out what works for you. And this really creates your messaging matrix. It's not just the words you say, but it's also how you deliver them on social media. Your messaging matrix is really what helps you unlock your unfair advantage when it comes to social media marketing, and really what helps you stand out from the other folks out there. All right, I want to dive into especially the first part of this matrix for a second, which is your difference. A lot of you put this in the chat, what you sell, which is great. You sell books, and a lot of you put this in the chat who it's for. So children's books, nonfiction, business nonfiction, I saw as well. But I want you to think about this for a moment. Why does it matter? And the reason I want you to think about this as well is when you're writing your social media posts, you could say something like, I'm writing a children's book that is geared towards 3rd graders, but you really want to add something in the why does it matter? Maybe it helps them understand how to play well with their other 3rd grade classmates, right? That's a very specific why does it matter? And you want to think about that transformation. And I encourage you to think about it like this. Identify what people will experience before your book and after your book, okay? So another example of this is if you write maybe like a horror novel, and it's like chilling, like bone chilling. Think about that feeling that you want people to have after they read your book. Is the hair on their arms going to stand up? Are they going to want to read this one with the lights on? Maybe that's just me. I get super freaked out about stuff like that all the time. But if you can really identify that feeling that people will have after they experience your work, that's something that you can put in the caption of your post. So instead of saying, read this book, it's great, you can really illustrate what that will feel like. I'll touch on the values piece a bit as well. Values really help separate you from the others out there. And values really talk about why you're writing this in the first place. So from the author's perspective, what called you to this work? And then we also have our delivery system. So we talked about our difference. What do we sell? Who is it for? Why does it matter? We talked about our values, which separate us from the other people out there. And we talked about that transformation, that feeling that our work brings. So talking about our delivery system, your preference does matter. So a lot of you put writing in the chat. If you prefer writing, I definitely suggest that you keep going that way. Begin with the end in mind. So if your goal is to get people to purchase your books, then we want to keep that in mind. And basically, any of the platforms will work for you. So a lot of questions I get about social media is like, which platform should I be on? Pretty much any of them will work with this type of strategy. There are some that are more popular than others right now, but you can pretty much apply this anywhere. So here's what this looks like in real life. These are a few examples from my clients. So this is an example, and actually I picked one example here of a client who likes writing. She is a life coach. She's a feminist life coach, and she likes writing. And so I wanted to show y'all this example today because you don't have to post pictures of yourself on social media. You can pull text from your work and use that. We use Canva to design this little graphic, and I'll show you how this can look as well in other formats once we get to more into creating content as well. All right, so that's the messaging piece of the framework, and it's super important that you nail that down because as you're writing your social media posts, you want to have that running thread of transformation in everything you do. So that running thread of that feeling that people get when they experience your work. All right, next we want to build your authority as an author and as a writer. And this works no matter what size audience you have. And we're going to start off by creating a posting strategy. Okay, and when you are looking at yourself as an author, you're really positioning yourself as almost a leader in the space. And so we're going to kind of take that idea of a leader and we're going to structure it into our posts. So we're going to use the 5 pillars of social media content. And the first pillar is promotional. And this is typically where we tend to get stuck as creative people as we promote our work quite a lot. But notice that this is one of 5 pillars. So we'll go through all of the types of content that you can use to promote your work or types of things you can use to promote your work. But essentially, you're talking about your work and what you do, and you're asking for something with this type of content. The second type of content is educational. So if, for instance, you have a book that's a business book, a nonfiction business book, you want to educate around your subject matter. What are questions people ask before they purchase your book? How can you answer them on social media? And again, you're positioning yourself as an author and a leader. So you're a writer and you're a leader in this space. So you want to, why are people reading your books over everyone else's? The third piece of third piece of content for social media is community content. And this is really positioning yourself in the space of others, okay? So you want to showcase that you're not the only one in this space. There are other people talking about these topics. So when I think about writers and authors, I think about things that are happening in the industry. things that are happening in the industry. So is there a new audiobook format coming out, like a place where people can listen and consume your work? Is there some sort of award ceremony happening in your space? Is there a shift in how people consume books? A lot of people use Kindle, for instance. Is there an update there that you want to share with your audience? The fourth pillar of content is entertainment content. And as authors, as writers, this tends to be behind the scenes content. So for example, I use my husband as an example because he's an author as well. He uses Scrivener to write his work. And so an example would be maybe taking a screenshot of a work in progress. You can also show your desk space. You can also put memes and things like that in this category. There's a meme that goes around that's like, what people think authors do, what authors actually do. You could use a meme like that in this category as well. Then the last pillar of content is engaging content. And this pillar is specifically designed to encourage people to engage with your content. And the reason that we want to have this type of content here is what's twofold. The first is to feed the algorithm. So we want people to engage with our posts so that the algorithm can see that people are engaging with our content and that we have a community around what we're building. The second reason is that we want our community to connect with us. We don't want them to just leave Instagram or leave Facebook or leave Twitter every single time they see our posts. We want them to contribute to the conversation. So asking a question here can be great. A poll is a really great, easy way to do this. So a silly example would be, do you prefer summer or spring, winter or fall? And you'll have people in the comments who say, I prefer summer. And you'll also have people in the comments who say, I prefer none of those. And so you're adding dialogue to that conversation. Awesome. All right, just a few examples of these. So promotional content style. Especially if you're a writer, I wanted to include this. This is one of my clients, Linda. She's not necessarily a writer, but you can see that her content tends to be fairly long and educational. So if you have something like this could work as well. And we literally have an arrow, emoji arrow link that points to that link that we're linking out to. This is a type of educational content. This is a writer who is also a doctor, and she uses illustrations to illustrate her point. She's authored 3 books. And so when she's talking about, she mostly talks to post-menopausal women, and she's talking about hormone imbalance here. So she uses a graphic to illustrate that point and educates why that is. And sometimes this also leads to her book, sometimes it doesn't, but she's really establishing herself as an authority in this space. Here's an example of a community content, sharing, retweeting, sharing updates, things like that. Another example of community content, this is an example of showcasing other people in the community, which could help as well. This is an example of some engaging content. So this is just a question that you can ask people as well. How did you come up with your business name? What are you up to these days? That sort of thing. Awesome. All right. Next, let's talk about design. So I know as writers, sometimes the design piece doesn't come to us as naturally. So I want to show you an example of how you can start designing things for social media and give you a bit of a jump start into that. So when we think about design, you want to use the same as your website or the same as your books. If you have a specific design already in mind for the books. That's a really great place to go. And if you don't, an easy way to get around this is to just start using similar colors, fonts, and patterns. And you want to just make this decision one time and don't change it. And this gives you an overview of how you can use this on social media. It gives you an example of that. And what you're going to do is choose similar colors, fonts, and patterns, and then create a template. And I like to use canva.com, like I said, but the template saves you time. It saves you from making a decision. It creates unity in your work and it gives you brand recognition. So when people see your posts, they know subconsciously to associate those posts with you. Here's an example of that. And I'm using Instagram because it's so visual, but you can apply this to any platform. So this is a life coach who you can see there's similar colors here, mostly purple, little bit of green, and then white backgrounds. You could absolutely do something like this, create it once and move on. Yes, I use Canva all the time. And yes, there's a free version. It is actually quite robust, surprisingly, for the free version, which is great. Here's another example if you use a lot of colors. So this brand uses primary colors, and I wanted to show the two side by side because the other was mostly one color. This uses a variety of colors, but you can see that they use a similar pattern here. And they're using 4 colors. They pick those colors and they're the same every time. Awesome. All right. Awesome. We're good on time. We have about 10 more minutes. I'm going to go through the last of my slides and I see some questions coming in, which is fantastic. So definitely keep asking your questions there. So the last piece of this puzzle, so we talked about the messaging. We talked about actually creating the content. The last piece of this puzzle is actually building impact around the work that you do. And I like to think of this like dating. So when we write our novels, sometimes it does feel a little bit like dating, like when we write, when we do our work, in the sense that we need people to be attracted to this enough to commit to purchasing our work, because that's how we make our money, right? So when we think about that dating analogy, a lot of us get all dressed up and then we sit at home and we hope the right person knocks on the door and falls in love with us, right? We're just waiting. Okay, somebody write that book. We're just waiting for someone to knock on the door and fall in love with us. But in reality, when it comes to dating, we actually have to put ourselves out there. We put ourselves on the apps. We, in a post-pandemic world, go to bars and like meet people and talk to people. The same, you're welcome for that book idea. You don't have to give me credit for it. The same is true though for our work, in the sense that when we write our novel, when we write our book, when we do the work that we do, we also have to put ourselves out there and let people know that it's available. We have to let people know that it exists. And this is where the impact comes in. Yes, you have to have a great book, which in this sense is also the internal marketing. Yes, you have to have your messaging for the book down, like understand why people would read it. Yes, you have to create a great profile on social media, which is kind of like getting dressed up for your date. But then you also have to put yourself out there. Excuse me. So I want to give you some tips for how to connect with your people. And these are the people who will love your book, right? Where do we find those die-hard readers? Well, you want to start looking at your current followers. If you have them, see who they're connected with. Go look at their followers, look in their circles. Also look for people who post in targeted hashtags. Does anyone know about Bookstagram? There's like a whole community of book lovers on Instagram. Look at hashtag Bookstagram and you will find your people. These are people who love reading, and I know because I'm one of them. I'm not a writer in any sense of the word, but I love reading. I run a book club. I know about these things. Even booktubers, lots of people on YouTube who read books. And yes, Lisa goes there for book recommendations, but that means you also are going to find potential readers there. You also want to look at people who engage with your posts. So if you use hashtag authors of Instagram, there may be other people looking at those hashtags as well and engaging with your post. You can look at who competitors follow as well. So if there is another, maybe a significant author in your space, people read more than one book. So go look at that author's page, see who is engaging with their content and go from there. And you can also look at other industry leaders. So a great example for authors is look at people who, there's a lot of podcasters right now who talk about books and who read books and who talk about writing and the writing process. That could be great. Just other people in the industry. And you can also do certain locations. This strategy works when we're not in a global pandemic. It works a little bit better. But if there are large conferences or things that are happening, even if you are not attending those conferences, go look and see who's checking in, who's hanging out, who's talking about your topic, because there's so many people who could become potential readers of your work. And what we want to do when we find these people is to apply the Savvy engagement recipe. And the recipe has a few ingredients. The first one's a like, so you can like their posts, engage with them in some way. You can leave a comment. You want to make sure this comment is super specific as well. There's a bunch of robots out there leaving fake comments. We don't want to be confused with those. You can follow them if you think they're a super highly targeted person. So for example, maybe it is a podcaster who, reviews horror novels and you happen to write horror novels. You may want to follow them because you want to continue to engage with them over time and build up that relationship. And you can send a direct message. Use this lightly, okay? Just like with dating, we don't want to run up to someone and go, "Oh my gosh, marry me." Like, it's a bit aggressive for most people. We probably want to start off with like, "Hey, I like your shirt," or "I like your shoes," right? So keep it light. Don't go straight to "buy my book." Then you can also share and tag as well. Again, use this sparingly, but this works really great for building a community around what you're doing. All right, I did want to show an example of spam on Instagram specifically, but this seems to be happening everywhere now, where people will just comment random things that almost seem like comments. Has this happened to anybody else? They almost seem like real comments, but they're very clearly spam. We do not want to be confused with these people. Yes. Unfortunately happens to a lot of us. So when we're applying this strategy, we want to make sure that we're not getting mixed up with these people. So just be specific in how you do this. Remember that you are a human connecting with other humans. So if you wouldn't say it like in a Starbucks line to somebody, don't say it on social media. Okay. Cool. Yes. One of the biggest questions I get though is how much time do we spend on all of this, right? Like if you look at this strategy, you could easily spend hours and hours and hours, and I don't want you to do this. I want you to set aside 10 to 20 minutes per day. And again, remember, we're focusing on one platform. So 10 to 20 minutes a day, intentionally engaging. That means looking for people to like and comment on their posts, finding those influential people in the industry who you could build relationships with. Spend 10 to 20 minutes a day doing this, and you will see success from this sort of strategy. Again, think of it like working out. You could go to the gym and try to spend 12 hours, but you're not going to get muscles that way. At least that's what I'm told. You probably have to spend a significant amount of time over time building that up. And so it's the same for social media strategies as well. And if you hear my dogs barking, such is life. They like to be on webinars as well. They get a little jealous. All right. So last thing I want to talk about before we open it up to Q&A is measuring your success. Because as you're implementing these strategies, I want you to make sure that you actually know what's working and what's not, right? So if you post something on social media, how do you know it actually works for you and actually getting you to your goals? So there's a few different types of metrics I want you to track, and I'm going to put them into different buckets. The first one's community growth. So this is one where we tend to like stop here, but it's really just one of the metrics. This is new followers in your community. Some platforms call this likes. Some platforms call this subscribers. It's new people in your world, right? This is a really good indicator of interest, and it can give you a pulse point on how things are working. But you also want to look at things like impact. When I'm talking about impact, I'm talking about how many people saw your posts. And most platforms call this profile reach, post reach, post impressions, any of those words, you want to keep track of them over time. Is that number growing? Are you impacting more people? Okay. Engagement's a great one as well, because this feeds the algorithm. Like I said previously, we want to have an opportunity for the algorithm to know that we have people who like us in our community. Because if every time we post, someone clicks a link and goes somewhere else, right? Imagine posting on Facebook, someone clicks that link and goes somewhere else. Facebook's going to say, every time this person posts a link, someone clicks it and goes somewhere else. Let's stop showing this post. So you want to have posts intentionally that encourage community engagement and keep people on the app, but also you want to have connection with the people who are reading your work. You also want to start tracking intent. So this is things like website clicks. Did people even click those links? Depending on your platform, this can be something like profile visits or profile views. You know how on Instagram, you can't have a link in the caption. So you direct people to click link in the bio. You want to be able to show that as well. I love that question. Put it in the Q&A, and I'd love to show you guys how to see how many people saw your posts. And when you put in the Q&A, let me know which platform so I can be specific there. And then the last one is conversions. So this kind of gets a little bit tricky sometimes. So it depends on your setup. But an example of this would be if you're giving away a free chapter of your book, how many people actually signed up for that free chapter? I'm going to use my husband again as an example. He had a free short story that he used to get people to sign up for his email newsletter list. So a metric he tracked is how many people came from Instagram to sign up for that, how many people came from Facebook, from Twitter, etc. You want to make sure the metrics that you track match the intent of that content piece. So if you're promoting a book, you're not going to be looking at engagement because you're actually not asking for that. You're asking for people to go look at that book. So if you say, here's my new book, and there's no likes and comments, that's because maybe people went to go look at the new book. So make sure when you're looking at your metrics, you match the intent of that content piece. And I'll show you two examples of this. Here's one that's a question that was tweeted out. When we're looking at the success of this tweet, we want to look at how many people replied to the tweet because it's a question. So 40 replies. You can see that there's a lot of data here as far as impressions go, as far as profile clicks and likes and retweets. So if, for instance, we were looking at this post and we went, man, it only got one retweet. That's not really a great metric to look at. Instead, we want to look at replies. Last example here, this is a video from one of my clients, and I wanted to include this one because Facebook specifically does this where they'll put the video views. You can see the total video views, 720. Hold on. Total 3-second video views, 737. But what we really want to look at is 1 minute video views. When we look at the 1 minute video views, only 82 people watch 1 minute. That's really significant. People who watch 3 seconds almost doesn't even count, right? Right. Okay, last example. Sorry, I lied. One more example. For this one, it's a webinar promo for one of my clients. It only got 5 comments, which is kind of weird for this client. She usually gets more than that. But we actually looked at profile visits and website clicks. And we can see that people actually did go to the profile. They clicked on the website. So they did that action instead of commenting. Fantastic. All right, opening it up for questions, Q&A time. I think I did
We've got
good.
lots of questions here. The first question that everybody always asks is, would you be willing to share your slide deck after the fact so that people can go back and look through it again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. I'll include that in the email that will go out tomorrow. Perfect. Okay. So someone says, I really only post my events and presentations, so my social media feels like a notice board. How do I change that up? That's a good question.
Yes, start sharing your expertise. That's a really good place to start. So assume that person is coming to your profile for the first time and they don't quite know you enough to go to one of your events. So why should they? Start talking about what you do and why those events are important so that the next time you post an event, they kind of know you a little bit better.
Okay, great. So someone says, what if instead of video, I do live streaming? Do writers do live streaming? And do you have any examples?
Oh, yes. I'd love a good live stream. I think any sort of video is great. And I'll ask you to think about how you want to show up. If you think live streaming will work for you and you can come up with a consistent cadence, I actually think that's a really great way to make your difference in the space, because I don't see a lot of writers do live streaming. I would love to see a live stream reading of part of your work. I think that would be a beautiful thing. So if you do try it, let me know, because I'd love to check it out. But I also think that could bring in people who maybe potentially would have never known you before. There are a lot of platforms right now that are favoring live stream. One that comes to mind is Instagram right now. If you live stream, it kind of puts you in front of everyone else's stories on the feed page. So there's a lot more potential for people to notice you.
Yeah, and I always feel like live streams can be a bit more off the cuff. You can do a bit less preparation, and you can just sort of talk and chat in a way that's much more human than sometimes doing a prepared video. What do you think?
Oh, yes. I'm like, this is just how I prefer to teach anyway. So I'm a huge fan of it, but there's a whole lot more forgiveness when it comes to live streaming, because it's not supposed to be polished, right?
Yeah, that's the joy of it, I think. Okay, how much do I share other writers' stuff who's in the same genre as me, and how do I interact with other writers on social media?
Yes, I think the writing community is so powerful that I would love to see you share other writers' work. I would just make sure that it's clear, first of all, that it is another author's or writer's work. Especially for someone new to your page, you don't want them to misconstrue anything you're sharing. As far as frequency goes, I would say maybe 1 in every 5 posts or 1 in every 8 posts. I wouldn't do it any more frequently than that. And maybe as you're sharing, create something that still shows your branding. So for example, if you're going to do a roundup of, 4 books you read this week that you really enjoyed, maybe you're going to put a little Canva design together showing those 4 books and talking about why you liked them, but really still showcasing your branding as well.
So this person says, in engaging, how much should I respond to the comments? Because it seems like it could suck up a lot of time.
Yes.
Yes.
It can for sure. But it is one of the most important things you can do on social media. I like to say, unless you're Beyonce, you should reply to every single comment. Really, that's showing your community that you care about them. And it's not just the person that you're responding to who sees that. Most of us actually look at the comments. I bet most of you could consume social media in that way. You look at the post. If you see a lot of comments, you may open it up and look at the comments, and you never contribute. But you're looking and you're seeing and you're noticing. And so I think as someone who's growing, especially, you definitely want to respond. If it gets to the point where it's too many comments, that's a really good problem to have. See how you can get support either in responding to those comments or in other areas of your work so that you can respond to those comments as well.
Yeah, great. I was speaking to someone the other day who was talking about, I think it's called neuro mirroring, where if people read a comment that you've replied to someone else, their brain thinks that you've had an interaction with them. So even if it's not you participating in that, but just the people that are reading your comments still have that same feeling of knowing you and having interacted with you. It's powerful. I mean, on ProWritingAid, we try and reply to everybody because it's just such a great way to engage with people. It's cool.
I'm going to have to look that up. I love that concept though.
Yeah, I'll find it for you. It's great. I think neuro mirroring, if anybody can remember, I think it was in one of our sessions. Let me know. So how do the algorithms used by social media platforms impact how much visibility your content gets, and what can you do to influence them to push things more in your favor? That is the big question, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it's something that we all want, right? We all want everyone to see our posts. But one of the biggest challenges of social media is that the more people use it, the harder it is to get our posts seen. Now, I'll share a few hacks that are working now, but I do want to emphasize that they're tactics. They're not meant to be long-term strategies because the algorithm always changes. So it depends on the platform, but Instagram is a favorite for a lot of people right now. So if you have not yet, try posting an Instagram reel. That can typically jumpstart your engagement if you haven't posted one yet, because they're favoring that type of content. And again, emphasizing this is a tactic. This is March 2021. I can't promise how long this will work, but that's what's working right now. Another one is on LinkedIn. If you're using that platform, instead of putting a link with your post, put that as the very first comment. So maybe you have your post that's like, I'm really excited about my latest work. I'll put the link in the comments. And then the first comment is the actual link to it. And it tricks the algorithm into not thinking that you're trying to send people away from the algorithm. So again, it's a tactic. It may not work forever, but certain things like that can trick the algorithm. At the end of the day, the algorithm is there to serve itself in the platform. All it wants is people to spend more time so they can sell more ads. So if your post can somehow keep people on the platform longer, then that's really what's going to win over everything else.
Okay, great. What proportion of an author's time should be spent managing marketing channels as opposed to writing? I think that's always the push and pull with writers who are trying to build their platform but also want to write the books. What do you recommend for a breakdown?
Yes. So I mentioned the 10 to 20 minutes a day engaging. That's typically a great spot for a lot of us. I like to do this in the morning. So before I start any of the rest of my work, I kind of knock it out and get it out of the way. So figure out your own cadence there. But then there's the actual content creation side, which is, designing your Canva graphic and writing it. Typically, I recommend spending 1 hour a week on that type of work. So sometimes you may not get a lot of posts out of that. Sometimes you will, but I find that if you stick with that 1 hour a week, it is flexing a different muscle. It's learning a different skill. You can commit to that longer over time. If you're in a heavier promotional period, you may want to spend more, like if you're launching something new, but just kind of maintenance mode, 1 hour a week is a really good sweet spot for a lot of us.
Yeah, I think so too. And if you make what we find as like a bit of a cheat, you'll have seen on some of the Facebook channels, is we have templates and then we can just go in and change the content. So we've got quotes that we use and it always has the same background, the same frame, and we just go in and we change up the quotes and then we can send it out again. And it's good because people recognize it, but also it's good because it's pretty quick.
Yes. Yeah, you just want to keep it quick.
Yeah, once you've got those sort of basics in place, then you can just sort of keep shuffling things around. This is a good question. Why do authors ask so many questions as posts on Twitter? Is this a deliberate tactic to help gain more traction with their followers?
Yes, because Twitter specifically wants to see conversation. That's kind of really why the platform is designed. It's one of the few platforms where that's where people go to look for thought leadership on a lot of topics, especially hot topics like politics or cultural issues or social commentary. People go to Twitter for that. So as an author, they try to tap into that by asking questions, hoping people will respond.
Well, so then related to that on Twitter, because I feel like Twitter is sometimes the hotbed for this, what is the best way to deal with criticism, conflict, and trolling on one of your posts? Should you ignore it or should you engage and attempt to educate?
This one is tricky because it does depend on your brand. So, like, if you are an activist, for instance, and many of my clients are, it's part of their approach to marketing to kind of stir things up and start conversations and be dynamic in that way. And so if that's part of the strategy, then yes, you do want to contribute to those conversations. If it's not, then you have kind of two options. I like to diffuse the situation. Personally, I do not engage. It's not, I just do not have the mental space to go there with people. So thank you for your thoughts. and move on. Yeah, that's it. Like, really, thank you for your opinion. If they're being belligerent, though, like I've had, especially on YouTube, this happens to me where people will say racially charged things or just derogatory, I'll just block them and delete the comment, because there's some things that they're just like flat out trolling. So feel free to block, delete, and move on, and report them as well to the platform if it's a repeat offender. So you kind of have to know your own boundaries. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't know what those are until those boundaries are actually pushed. But know that if it does make you feel uncomfortable, block, delete, and move on. You don't have to have that in your space.
Yeah. I mean, we have no problem blocking and deleting from we've had several situations where people have added quite offensive content, and we just go straight in and get rid of it. We have no space for any of that on our platforms at all. So don't feel like because somebody has put something on there, you need to engage with it or even let it exist on your channel. Get them out.
Yes.
Do you pay for social media ads?
I do now, but I consider it an advanced strategy. So a lot of the strategies work best when you can figure out what works organically first. So what can happen is if you feed the Facebook machine with ads, they will take your money whether it worked or not. So you kind of want to know a good sense of what works or not. So I'm going to pick on my husband again because he is in this space. The free short story is what worked the best for him. He tried, the first chapter of books. He has a series. He tried the whole first book in the series. And really the free short story is what worked the best when it came to organically. And so when he started running ads, that's what worked the best as well. So you kind of have to have a little bit of a sense of the journey that people take towards consuming your work. And then if you can understand that, then you can start running paid advertising towards it. The other challenge is because as writers, our work can exist in so many different ways. It's really hard to track. So for instance, Amazon ads are often a really good place, but their tracking is a little bit weird sometimes. And if you don't fully know who's consuming your books, you can still spend a lot of time, money, and energy there.
And I always think with paid social advertising, it's worth spending a bit of time it's worth taking, just one of these free courses that you can take online, or, just something to understand the nuts and bolts before you start throwing too much money into social, because it's really easy way to flush money down the toilet. And sometimes just little tweaks can make a really big difference, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And there's so much free content out there. Even Facebook has the Facebook Blueprint course.
Yeah.
Which teaches you how to do a lot of the stuff as well.
Yeah, and it feels a bit scary in the beginning, but it doesn't take that long to figure out sort of at least the basics so that you can start running some experiments.
Yes, exactly.
So what if you have more than one genre? Should you have a site for each one separately?
This is a tricky question, and I don't have an easy answer, but I'm going to give you some follow-up questions to consider here. The first is, it depends on why people read your books. I want to challenge you to consider that, your work. So I'll give an example. One of my colleagues is a digital marketer, and she does spoken word, and she does like a little poetry on the side. But people follow her for her, and it's her brand. So even though she's got this really odd mix, and she does like relationship coaching as well, she's got this odd mix of talents that just oddly works together and works for her and her personal brand. And so it doesn't really matter what she's talking about. People are drawn to her and her work, and they'll self-select what they want to consume. And so if you are a brand like that, if your personality is like that, then absolutely have everything under one umbrella and see if you can find a running thread between all of them. And the reason I say that is because managing multiple channels is tough for anybody. And I say that, and it's my job, and it's tough. And I actually have a podcast episode called Should I Have One Instagram Account or Two? That goes through these questions as well. And it can work for any platform. so you want to think about your position, so as a brand, and then your capacity. Can you manage multiples at the same time? If you want to, so let's say you have like rotating launches, that could work as well. So maybe in the spring, you're working on this one side of your company, and then in the fall, you're doing the other brand. You could flip flop between the two and just kind of shift your energy. And maybe at any given time, you're spending 90% of your energy on one brand or the other. I think that could also work for you as well.
Great. So we started with 20 questions and now we're at 19 because they keep coming in and we're running out of time a little bit, but let's see if we can get through a few more. There's a few people that are asking about analytics, like how do they see how many people are seeing them? What's the reach?
Yes. So I want to show you this example with Instagram if I can, because this it really does depend on the platform, but a lot of these platforms have insights. So if I can, let me stop sharing that screen and share my phone screen. I've got a little app that helps me do this, and I just want to quickly show y'all how to find this. Okay, so when you're looking at the Instagram app on your phone, if you tap over to your profile, in the top corner, there's a little pie or a little three lines. You're going to click that and then tap on Insights. And this will pull up a ton of information about your posts. The best place to start, scroll down, look at the content you've shared, tap on that. And then from here, you can actually look at anything in, let's say, the past year. So I'm looking at the posts that have the most reach in the past year. And this can give you a sense of how many people saw those posts. You can also look at things like, if I want to look at website taps, so that's how many people actually went and clicked the link in the bio. I see a trend here. Every time I say that I'm hiring, people go and tap that link in the bio. Which kind of makes sense. So start looking at some of the trends in some of this content and just start exploring some of these insights here, just so you can see what actually is working and what's not.
Okay, and there's something similar on all the different platforms, right?
Yes, it's called insights or reporting or analytics on any platform.
Okay, cool. So I've got so somebody was just starting out. Would you say they should try Twitter or Facebook first?
I'm going to have to go with Twitter on this one. Facebook is tough to grow right now without paid advertising. So Twitter it is.
Okay, great. So someone says, how much of your personal life do you show? Because they're concerned it might invite stalkers, which I think is something that a lot of people worry about.
Yeah, it is a personal boundary. It depends. I saw one of my blogger friends like basically live posted her whole like birth of her child, which to me is, it's a lot. It's too far. For her, it's her life, so she enjoyed it. It's your personal preference. You don't have to show anything if you don't want to. I am actually a very private person, even though I love social media. So I show things without showing everything. An example would be my dogs. I don't talk about my personal relationships a lot, but I can show my dog and kind of somehow relate it to social media because my one dog is like insanely confident. So I'll maybe show a picture of him and then talk about being confident on social media. And that's how I kind of married the two, personal and business.
I mean, I think you can't go wrong with a dog, as everybody that comes along to Haley's sessions knows Knox very well. And when we first started, there was a dog behind Andrea here on the chair, but I think he's disappeared.
Oh, yes, he's gone now.
It's a shame. He was lovely. So someone says, how long do you expect that it would take to get a really good following on Facebook?
On Facebook specifically?
Yeah, that's what the question is. But
yeah, see, if you're new starting out, it's not something I recommend right now. If you don't have a paid advertising budget, it is challenging. Now, if you have other places you can leverage your audience, so let's say you are already well known in some sort of way, if you start a Facebook page, then you can build up an audience that way. Otherwise, I've just found it very challenging. So I don't have an answer for that. And for any platform, it really just depends on how people connect with what you're doing. And if they connect enough that they want to share it with other people, that's how things kind of blossom and grow.
Okay. So I've got a good question here, maybe to finish with, because we're just about out of time. So someone says, who would come to you for consultancy? What is their focus and why do they need you? That's a handy question.
Oh, me personally?
Yeah.
So I
Well, there
work with
may
a
be
lot of
savvy social school.
Yes. So I work with a lot of personality driven brands. So people who so my favorite people are like, I know I have a message to share and I don't really like social media. So help. Those are typically the people I work with. The people who, pick up Instagram and they know exactly where Instagram stories is and what to say and how to find it, they don't need my help. So typically it's people who are like, hey, I heard you say Instagram reels and I'm a little bit embarrassed because I don't even know where it is. If those are the questions that you're having, then that's what I cover in my programs and in my services.
Okay. And so you do consultancy as well with that, not just the schools?
In this, the consulting is included in the school. So it's great because it's not just me. I have my team who supports all of our members in the school. We have over 200 members who are learning social media, and we're constantly updating. Like we just added in a whole course on Clubhouse. So we're constantly updating and adding new features. And so you can get specific guidance and help on your situation in the school. I do offer one-on-one services done for you. Typically, they're more for like celebrity clients. So, for instance, one of my clients is John Gray, the author of the Mars Venus book series.
Oh, yeah.
So we run their social as well. So if it becomes the point where like the person who's like, I can't respond to any questions, that's when my team can take over at that point as well.
Okay, great. I've just dropped some links in the chat for everybody if you wanted to have a quick look at the Savvy Social School or at Andrea's Instagram page there. And with that, I think we're out of time. So thank you. I feel like we squeezed a lot of information out of you in a short time.
Yay!
Yay.
Yes. And thank you everyone for joining me today. Y'all are fantastic.
Good. If you learned something, say so in the chat before we disappear here, and then hopefully Andrea will come back again and we can try and squeeze some more information out of her. Oh, great.
I'd be happy to. Oh, and I do see, yes, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. Honestly, that's why I signed up for social media in 2007 in the first place, because I was like, I have ideas and I know other people do too, and fan theories. I need to talk about this.
Yeah, I need to find my Harry Potter people. They're out there somewhere. Yeah, great. Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you next time round. Thanks again, Andrea. Bye.
Bye.